The baby came on a Thursday, not in the planned way, not in the specific organized way that Zara had been preparing for across the previous 8 weeks. The hospital bag packed and repacked. The birth plan discussed and revised and discussed again with a specific focused thoroughness that was her most natural mode of operating when the things she was preparing for mattered. The baby came the way some things come that matter enormously, early, without adequate warning. In the specific urgent way of something that has decided the timeline belongs to it, and not to the people who have been managing the timeline. Zara had been 36 weeks when the contraction started on a Wednesday night and had been in the hospital by midnight, and had delivered at 4:23 on a Thursday morning with Daniel beside her. Not in the waiting room. Beside her, which had required a specific conversation with the hospital's protocol team that Daniel had conducted with the particular quiet authority of a man who has grown up understanding which conversations require authority, and which require patience, and which require both, and who had correctly identified this as a both situation. He had been there. He had been there for all of it. And when the baby had arrived, small and present and making the specific sound that newborns make that is unlike any other sound available in the human experience. Daniel Okafor had looked at his daughter and had understood something about himself that 29 years of living had not produced, and that 4:23 on a Thursday morning had produced completely. He was a father. The understanding was total. It did not leave room for anything else for a while. They had named her Amara. It meant grace in the specific language that Daniel's grandfather had spoken, and that Daniel had learned enough to understand its most important words, and that the president, Charles Okafor, grandfather now, a word he'd been turning over his mind since Thursday morning with the specific private pleasure of a man receiving something he had not anticipated wanting as much as he wanted it, had said, was exactly right when Daniel had called him from the hospital at 4:41 in the morning. The president had been awake. He had said he would come that afternoon. He had come that afternoon with the specific quiet that a man brings when he is doing something that is genuinely for someone else rather than for the cameras and the image, and the carefully managed public narrative that 22 years in public life had taught him to construct around everything he did. He had held Amara. He had been very still holding her in the specific way of people who are holding something that requires them to be still. He had looked at Zara across the hospital room, and had said his son had good judgment. Zara had said she was glad he thought so. The president had smiled, the private one, not the public one, the one she had first seen in the residence, and that she had understood was the most honest thing about him. Amara had been in the world for 11 days when the article was published. Zara had not known it was coming. Nobody in the room with her had known it was coming. Not Daniel, not Patricia Moore, who had become in a month since the library something between a security officer and a specific kind of presence that Zara had come to rely on in the way that you come to rely on people who are competent and warm simultaneously. The article had appeared on a Wednesday morning on a news platform that had 4 million daily readers and a specific reputation for the kind of journalism that is accurate in its facts and devastating in its framing, and that understands that the framing of accurate facts is where the real editorial power lives. The headline had said, "President's son fathers child with woman whose family threw her out." The article had contained specific details. Zara's name, the pregnancy, Clement Street, the Tuesday morning, the library, the SUV in the driveway, and the neighbors watching. The specific conversation in the periodical section between Zara and Patricia Moore. Details that could not have been assembled from public information alone. Details that required someone who had been present or someone who had been told by someone who had been present. Zara had read the article on her phone at 6:47 in the morning, sitting in the chair beside Amara's bassinet in a room that Daniel had arranged, the room that was warm and quiet and entirely hers, the room that had been her first honest space since the Tuesday morning in July. She had read it twice. Then she had put the phone face down on the table beside her and had looked at Amara sleeping, and had thought about the specific list of people who had known enough about the specific details in the article to have provided them. The list was not long. The details about the library and the periodical section and the conversation with Patricia had narrowed it considerably. By the time Daniel had come into the room at 7:15 with coffee and the specific expression of a man who has already seen the article and has been managing his response to it for 30 minutes, she had already arrived at the name she had been building toward since 6:47. She had looked at Daniel. He had looked at her. She had said, "Keisha." He had been quiet for a moment. Then he had said they did not know that yet. She had said she knew that yet. He had said they needed to be certain before they acted on certain. She had said she was certain. She had picked up her phone. She had not called Keisha. She had called her mother. Diane Mitchell had answered on the second ring. This was notable because Diane had been answering Zara's calls on the second ring since the reconciliation had begun, had been conducting the specific careful attentiveness of a mother who has understood that she has used up the grace that allows her to answer on the fourth ring, and who has decided that second ring is the minimum available expression of the attentiveness the situation requires. She had said hello, baby, before she had said anything else, and the hello, baby had been doing considerable work across the months of the reconciliation, containing within it the specific warmth of a woman who had not called her daughter baby for the months when the calling had not been possible, and who was now using the word with the specific deliberate frequency of someone making up for lost time. Zara had said she needed to ask her something, and that she needed her mother to answer honestly. Diane had said, of course. Zara had said had she told anyone about what happened on the Tuesday in July, about the library or the security officer, or the specific details of how Daniel had come to Clement Street. Diane had been quiet for a long time. A long time. The specific quality of a silence that contains something rather than nothing. Zara had said, Mom. Diane had said she had talked to her sister. Just her sister. She had been upset and she had needed to process with someone, and her sister was a person she processed with, and she had told her sister some things in the specific confiding way of sisters, and she had not. She had specifically not told her sister anything that she understood would go further. Zara had said when had she talked to her sister. Diane had given a date. The date had been 3 weeks before the article. Zara had said thank you and had ended the call. Diane's sister was Keisha's mother. The specific geometry of the information's travel from Diane to her sister to Keisha to a journalist with 4 million daily readers had taken approximately 3 weeks and had required Keisha to make a decision that Keisha had made without understanding the full weight of what she was deciding. This was a specific charity that Zara had decided to extend to Keisha. Not that what Keisha had done was acceptable, it was not, but that Keisha had been operating from the specific limited vantage point of a 24-year-old who had been given information she did not know the value of and who had made a decision she had not fully examined. This was a charity. It was not absolution. It was simply the specific distinction between malice and carelessness that Zara had decided was worth maintaining, because maintaining it was more honest than collapsing the two, and because Zara Mitchell had always been more interested in the honest version of things than the convenient one. The article had produced consequences with the speed that articles with 4 million daily readers produce consequences. The president's communications team had issued a statement, measured, dignified, confirming the relationship between Daniel and Zara, without confirming the specific details of the article, and declining to comment on private family matters with the specific professional language of a communications team that has been trained for exactly the situation, and that has executed the training well. The statement had not been enough to stop the conversation, because the conversation was already larger than any statement was going to stop. Social media had taken the article and had done what social media does, had distributed it and had added to it, and had generated from it the specific proliferating commentary of millions of people responding to a story about a young woman who had been thrown out of her home while pregnant, and whose story had arrived in their feeds on a Wednesday morning, and it activated the specific moral clarity that people bring to situations involving the vulnerability of young women and the failures of family and the surprising arrivals of grace. The commentary had been overwhelmingly in Zara's favor. This was something she had not anticipated, and that had arrived with a specific, disorienting quality of something large and unexpected. The public had looked at the story, at the Tuesday morning in the 2 bags in the library in the driveway, and the black SUV, and the president's son holding a pregnant woman's hands on Suburban Street while her neighbors watched, and had made their judgment with the specific speed of people who encounter an injustice whose shape is immediately legible and who respond to legible injustice with a particular collective energy that social media amplifies into something resembling a movement. Her parents had been the specific focus of the collective energy. The comment sections and the posts and the threads had said things about Robert and Diane Mitchell that were sometimes right and sometimes excessive, and always pointed at the specific failure of 2 people who had thrown their pregnant daughter out of their home. Zara had read some of it. She had decided to stop reading it because reading it required her to inhabit a version of her own story that she was not interested in inhabiting. The version where she was purely a victim and her parents were purely villains, and the truth was simple enough to fit in a comment section. The truth was not simple enough to fit in a comment section. The truth was considerably more complicated than anything a comment section had ever contained, and Zara had known this since the Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after the driveway when her father had called and had said the specific true things rather than the convenient ones. The First Lady had called on the Friday after the article. Not a text, a call. Eleanor Okafor was 58 years old and had been the First Lady for 2 years, and had been Charles Okafor's wife for 31 of those years, and had been, in the 2 years of the presidency and the 31 years of the marriage, the specific kind of woman who operates at the highest levels of everything she is involved in without requiring the operation to be visible. She was not the kind of First Lady who was primarily decorative. She was the kind of First Lady who understood that the role was a position, and that positions had functions, and that her specific function was the one that her husband's position could not perform. The human one, the warm one, the specific quality of presence that makes people feel that what they're experiencing is being received by someone who has the capacity to receive it fully. She had called Zara on the Friday after the article, and had said she wanted to meet, just the two of them. No Daniel. No security beyond what was required. She had said she had some things she wanted to say that she would prefer to say in person. Zara had said she was available Saturday morning. Eleanor had said Saturday morning was perfect. She had arrived at 10. She had sat across from Zara in the warm sitting room of the residence that had been arranged for them, and had looked at Zara with the specific quality of attention of a woman who has been paying close attention to something for several months, and who has arrived at the moment when the paying of attention has produced something she is ready to act on. She had said she had watched Zara across the months since the driveway with the specific interest of a woman who recognizes something in another woman and who takes the recognition seriously. She had said she wanted Zara to know something about her. Eleanor Okafor, First Lady, wife of the President, that very few people knew, and that she was choosing to share because she believed it was relevant and because she believed Zara was the kind of person who could receive relevant information and use it well. Zara had said she was listening. Eleanor had said that 32 years ago she had been 26 years old and unmarried and pregnant, and that the pregnancy had not been Charles's, had been from a relationship that had ended before Charles, and she had found each other, and that her family had responded to pregnancy with the specific response of family that had a certain kind of reputation to protect. She had said she had lost the pregnancy at 14 weeks. She had said she had never entirely stopped carrying it. She had said she was telling Zara this not because the situations were identical. They were not. But because she wanted Zara to understand that the person sitting across from her knew something from the inside about what it meant to be a young woman whose family's response to her vulnerability had been to treat the vulnerability as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be supported. She had said she was on Zara's side, not because Zara was with Daniel. She had said this clearly, and she had meant it clearly, but because Zara was the kind of person that Eleanor Okafor put herself on the side of regardless of the circumstances. She had said she hoped that meant something. Zara had looked at the First Lady of the country sitting across from her in a warm sitting room on a Saturday morning, and had said it meant a great deal. Eleanor had nodded. Then she had said there was something else. The something else had taken 20 minutes to say. Eleanor had said it carefully and in the specific order that the careful saying required, building from beginning, which was 30 years ago, and a city in Georgia, and two young men who had known each other before either of them was anything that the world subsequently recognized them as being. She had said that Charles and Robert Mitchell had been friends. Not acquaintances, friends. The specific friendship of two young men in their mid-20s who had lived in the same neighborhood and had worked at the same place for 3 years and had been in each other's lives with the daily ordinary frequency of people whose lives overlap in enough places that the overlap becomes a foundation of something real. She had said the friendship had ended. She had said it had ended because of the specific event that had involved money and a decision that Robert Mitchell had made, and that Charles had been unable to forgive at the time, and that he had subsequently. Across 30 years of distance, and the specific perspective that 30 years of distance produces, come to understand in a more complicated way than the unforgivable simplicity of his 27-year-old response. She had said Charles did not know that she was telling Zara this. She had said she was telling Zara this because Robert Mitchell was Zara's father, and because understanding the full architecture of the situation that Zara was navigating seemed to Eleanor to be something Zara was owed. She had said Zara could do whatever she chose with the information. She had said she trusted Zara's judgment. Zara had looked at Eleanor Okafor and had thought about the Tuesday morning and the 2 bags and the library and the driveway in Amara at 4:23 on a Thursday morning, and the article in Keisha and her mother's silence on the phone, and had understood that the story she was inside was considerably larger than the story she had believed she was inside, and that the largeness of it was not finished arriving. Eleanor had reached across, and had held Zara's hand for a moment. She had said she would leave her to think. She had stood up. She had gone to the door. She had turned back once and had said, "Take care of that baby. She is going to be something." Zara had said she knew. Eleanor had left. Robert Mitchell had come to see Zara on the following Tuesday. He had called first, had called a Sunday, and had said he needed to see her, and that he had something he needed to say that he had been carrying for a long time, and that the carrying of it had become, in the weeks since the article and the public conversation about his family, the specific impossible weight of the thing that has been kept too long in a space that has become too small for it. Zara had said she would see him. He had come on Tuesday with the specific quality of a man who was prepared for a conversation, the way men prepare for the hardest available conversation, by deciding what he's going to say and then arriving and discovering that the deciding has not made the saying any easier. He had sat across from his daughter. He had looked at Amara in the bassinet. He had looked at Zara. He had said he owed her the truth about some things. Zara had said she was listening. He had said her brother Marcus had been born before he and Diane were married. He had said it in the specific, direct way of a man who has decided that the only available route through what he needs to say is a direct one. He had said he had left Diane when she told him she was pregnant. He had said left not as a euphemism, but as a specific literal fact of a man who had been 24 years old and frightened and had made the worst decision available to him and had walked away from the woman who was carrying his child. He had said he had been gone for 3 months. He had said Diane had been alone for 3 months with a pregnancy and no support and no income and the specific daily reality of a woman who has been abandoned by the person who was supposed to stay. He had said he had come back. He had said coming back had been the right thing and that he had known it was the right thing when he did it, but that knowing it was the right thing had not and did not absolve the 3 months of leaving which nothing absolved and which he had been carrying since 1987 in the specific way that people carry the things that they know about themselves that are irreconcilable with the image they have subsequently built. He had said he had thrown his daughter out for something that he himself had done. He had said it clearly and without the softening language that people use when they are saying something true that they wish were not true. He had said it was the most hypocritical thing he had ever done in his life, and that the hypocrisy had not been invisible to him while he was doing it. He had known while he was making Zara pack her bags that he had no right to make her pack her bags, and he had made her pack them anyway, and the knowing and the doing of it simultaneously was a specific thing that he was least able to make peace with, and that he was not going to pretend to have made peace with, because pretending was what had gotten him to this Tuesday in the first place. Zara had listened to all of it. She had been very still throughout. When he finished, she had said she needed a moment. He had said, of course. She had stood up and had gone to the window and had looked out at the garden and had thought about her mother alone and pregnant in 1987 and had thought about herself on Clement Street in July with 2 bags and had understood that the specific thing she was feeling was not simple and was not going to resolve into something simple and that the not simpleness of it was actually the most honest, available response to what she had just been told. She had turned back from the window. She had looked at her father. She had said she had one question. He had said anything. She had said, did her mother know that he was going to tell her this today? He had been quiet for a moment. Then he had said no. He had said he had not told Diane he was coming. He had said he had decided on his own that the telling needed to happen and had not discussed it with Diane, because discussing it with Diane would have given him the opportunity to talk himself out of it, and he had not wanted the opportunity to talk himself out of it. Zara had looked at her father and had understood something about him that the previous 30 years of being his daughter had been building toward and had not quite arrived at. That Robert Mitchell was a man who had made serious mistakes and who knew it and who had been living inside the knowing of it for a very long time, and whose specific failure had been not the making of mistakes, but the management of the image that covered mistakes rather than the honest reckoning with them that might have produced something different. She had understood it and had filed it in the place where true things about people you love are filed, not for use against them, simply for accurate understanding. She had said she needed more time. He had nodded. He had stood up. He had looked at Amara one more time. He had said she was beautiful. Zara had said she knew. He had gone to the door. He had stopped. He had said he was sorry. Not the general sorry or the apologies that come in the weeks after the driveway. The specific sorry of a man naming the specific thing he was sorry for. He was sorry for leaving Diane. He was sorry for 30 years of not saying so. And he was sorry for making his daughter pack 2 bags on a Tuesday morning for something that he had done himself and had never been held accountable for. 3 specific sorries. Each one landing differently. Each one real. Zara had said she heard him. He had left. She had sat with everything for a long time. Diane had called that evening. She had known Robert had gone to see Zara. He had told her when he returned, had come home and sat at the kitchen table and told her where he had been and what he had said, and Diane had listened to it all with the specific expression of a woman receiving something she had been waiting for someone to say for 37 years. She had not been angry at Robert for going without telling her. She had been something more complicated than angry. She had been the specific quality of a woman who has spent 37 years managing a secret that was not entirely hers to manage, and who has watched the secret produce consequences for people around her while she has managed alone, and who has felt, in the watching, the specific accumulated weight of a management that has never been shared in the way that management of something this size requires it to be shared. She had called Zara. Zara had answered. Diane had said she needed to say something that she should have said a long time ago, and that she had not said, because not saying it felt like the only way to protect her marriage and her family, and the specific life she had built on top of the thing that had almost prevented it from being built. She had said she knew what Robert had told her. She had said she wanted Zara to know that she had known all along that what they did on the Tuesday morning in July was wrong, and that she had done it anyway, and that the doing of it had not been ignorance, had not been the specific innocence of a person who does not understand what they are doing, had been the full knowing of a woman who understood exactly what she was doing to her daughter and who had done it because the alternative, having a conversation that might have led to the truth about Marcus coming out, had felt more threatening to the life she was protecting than putting her daughter out of the house was. She had said that was the full truth. She had said she had sacrificed Zara for protection of a secret, and that there was not a version of that was anything other than what it was. She had said it and had waited. The line had been quiet. Then Zara had said, "Mom, I need to call you back." She had ended the call. She had looked at her phone. She had looked at Amara. She had looked at Daniel, who had been in the room throughout, and who had been very still throughout in a specific way. He was still when something required him to receive it fully before responding to it. She had picked up her phone again. There had been a notification, a message from Eleanor Okafor. The message had said, "There is something I did not finish telling you on Saturday about your father and my husband. I think you need to know the rest before it finds you from somewhere else. Call me when you are ready." Zara had looked at the message. She had looked at Daniel. She had put the phone down on the table. On the other side of the city, Robert and Diane Mitchell were sitting at their kitchen table for the first time in 37 years without the specific weight of the secret between them, and finding the sitting strange and necessary, and the beginning of something they did not yet have a name for. In the room where Amara was sleeping, the specific, ordinary, extraordinary business of a new life continuing, in an entirely unbothered way continued. And somewhere a journalist with 4 million daily readers was preparing the second article. And somewhere Keisha was looking at her phone and understanding for the first time the full weight of the things she had set in motion. And the 3 threads, the message from Eleanor, the call from Diane, the second article coming, were sitting in the specific charged silence of things that are about to arrive simultaneously and that are going to require, from the woman at the center of all of them, exactly the kind of courage that a Tuesday morning in July with 2 bags and a closed door had first required, and that Amara's arrival at 4:23 on a Thursday morning had confirmed was present and available and entirely sufficient for whatever came next. Whatever came next was coming. Zara Mitchell, who had been 22 years old and 7 months pregnant and alone on a driveway in July, picked up her phone. She was ready.
Subscribe.